we dedicate the month of November to talking about veterans and work, I'm honored to talk to my dad, Jim Lynch, about when he served in the U.S. Army from 1968 to 1971 as the Chief Warrant Officer and Huey pilot in the Vietnam War. He has a lot of wisdom to share. Hi, Dad.
Hi, Joan.
It's the first time you don't say hi, Bones. So I wanted to start with why serving the military was so important to you.
Well, we had a tradition of serving in the family. My grandfather was in the Marine Corps. My father was in the Marine Corps. I had three uncles in the Army and one in the Navy. So, I was raised to honor the military through that.
So after high school, you went to college at Notre Dame, and the country was in the midst of the Vietnam War. Why did you drop out to enlist and become a helicopter pilot?
I only had 2 years in, and I wanted to interrupt and enlist. I had a very close friend who was a bomber pilot in World War II, and he had got me interested in flying a little bit. And he said, "Well, why don't you fly?" And I said, "I can't fly because I don't have a degree." And he said, "Well, you can sign up the Army. The Army has a warrant officer program, and you can fly through that." So I went down and checked out with a recruiter, and he said, sure enough, they had it. I had to take a little test there, and I passed it. I was scheduled for basic training and then warrant officer candidate school with flight school.
Weren't you a little tall to be a helicopter pilot?
Actually, Joan, if I had been one class later, I wouldn't have been able to get in. They changed the training helicopter that they used, and it was much smaller. So one class later, I wouldn't have been able to get in.
Well, that was lucky. I remember as a child hearing you say you have to learn how to hover before you can fly. Did that come easy to you?
Yeah, it was difficult for me because you'd get on the controls and the instructor would say, "You got it," and I would say, "I got it." And you would get off the controls, the helicopter would be sitting perfectly still, and then the next thing you know, it would start moving a little bit to the left, and you'd overcorrect really, and then it'd go too much to the right, and then it was going to the front, it was going to the back. You look like a palm tree there, and I really, really struggled with that from the outset. He had told me to concentrate out, way out in the field, but I couldn't get away from reacting to what was happening immediately to the helicopter until the last day. And if I didn't do it the last day, then I'd wash out. So he said, "You got it." I said, "I got it." In the minute I said that, he said to me, "Jim, look at that. Look at that buck out there in the tree line. That's the biggest buck I've ever seen in Texas. Look at him. Look, he's running along the fence and he just raised his tail." And I thought, well, I'm not going to flunk out because I can't hover. I'm going to flunk out because I'm blind because I can't see this deer. And he keeps talking to me about the deer, and I'm just staring and staring and staring. And then finally he said, "Look at the helicopter." And it was sitting perfectly still. So that's the essence of really being able to focus on something important way out and not let what's happening immediately around you affect what you're doing. And that, boy, did that come in handy in Vietnam when you're trying to hover down a hover hole to pick up some guys. It was a lot to be concentrating on. And I will say that you did learn pretty quickly how to compartmentalize fear and just focus on the job. And that was critical because there were lots of times when you had to make a command decision pretty quickly that obviously not only affected you but affected a lot of other people, and you had to be willing and able to do that, and you couldn't be distracted by other things.
You've also taught me that in order to make those types of decisions, you have to have skin in the game. Where did that come from?
So later on in my tour, after I'd been there quite a while, I was one of the more experienced pilots. The commanding officer came up to me right before the chow, and he said, "Mr. Lynch, we'd like to make you the test pilot for the company." And I was like, "Ooh, my gosh, test pilot! That sounds really good. Really important." I said, "Well, thank you, sir. I'll be happy to serve." So I'm in and having dinner with my buddies, and I said, "Hey, I just got the assignment of test pilot." And then one of the guys said, "You do know what that is, don't you?" I said, "Well, I'm not quite sure." And he said, "Well, it means that after dinner every night, you have to go up to the maintenance area, and the aircraft that all got shot up or the engines had to be changed, they all have to be taken up in test flight before we can use them again the next day. And that will be your job." So I was like, oh my God, in the dark. Not only that, in the dark. So the first night I go up there, and there's this maintenance sergeant, and he said, "Hi, Mr. Lynch. This aircraft is ready for the test flight." I said, "What'd you do?" And he said, "Well, we changed the engine." I said, "Okay, great." I said, "Where's your helmet?" And he looked at me. He said, "What?" I said, "Where is your helmet?" He said, "Well, my helmet's not here, Mr. Lynch." "I don't know what you mean." I said, "Well, your guys did change this engine, right?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, then I expect you to go up with me to make sure that it works properly." And he just looked at me with these big eyes. And I said, "Look, if you think you need another half hour, hour, whatever, to make sure that everything's perfect, that's fine. You know where my tent is. Come knock on the door." So about an hour and a half later, he came back with his helmet and he said, "Mr. Lynch, we're ready to do the test flight." And that's something I learned that carried me over all through my working life is things work best when the people involved have skin in the game.
I love that. You also taught me figure it outness, something I rely on every day in my career.
Yeah, well, of course, we not only were pilots, but all of us had side jobs that we had to do at night or during the day if we had a day when we weren't flying or whatever. So one day, my commanding officer comes up and he says, "Mr. Lynch, we need to rebuild the latrine, and I'm giving you the assignment, and here's some guys to help you with it." I'm a city kid from Philadelphia. I don't know anything about building anything. But we get lumber and supplies, and we get down to where we're going to do it. And really, all of it is just like a little shed. And you have to go in and you have to build this long bench that you cut holes in. So we get started building the shed, and we get to the point of the bench. And one of the guys says to me, "Now, Mr. Lynch, how high does this bench have to be?" And I said, "Well, geez, I don't know." So I kind of like squat down and I say, "About this high." So they take a they take a measurement from my butt to the ground, and we build the thing. So a couple of days later, I happened to be in there, and our commanding officer came in, the major, and I'm 6'5", and the major was maybe 5 feet. And he hops up on the latrine, and his feet are dangling there about a foot and a half off the ground, and he looks at me and just shakes his head.
So, Dad, you come home, you get your degree from Temple University through the GI Bill, and then get a job at Johnson and Johnson. How do you think the Army helped prepare you for the first step in your career?
Yeah, the recruiter said that J&J had a program where they were hiring ex-military officers with any degree, really, for what they called entry-level management positions. And what that turned out to be was a job as a production supervisor in a factory, working rotating 3 shifts. And I was lucky enough to get hired by them. I'd never worked shift work, and I'd never been responsible for a bunch of people on a factory floor. So that was a very, very fortunate opportunity for me, and that I'll always be thankful for. And what were they looking for? I think little things: attention to detail, accountability, the commitment to the mission, the work ethic. They knew that we coming in, we had commitment to the people that we were responsible for protecting them and for building them up and for honoring them. And they also knew that we had years of leadership training and exposure. All these things are things that any business should be looking for in terms of and be very happy about with the candidates that they bring in.
Well, I know Johnson and Johnson and our country, we're lucky to have you, and I'm so grateful for all the things that your service taught me too. I love you, Dad. Thanks for doing this.
Well, Bones, it was my pleasure.